First is that how does big tech look like when you see them from below, especially in the context of informality and uneven access? So if Kata or Jamila, Kata, do you want to go first?
So, in many contexts, like Colombia, platforms are not perceived as optional services, but as the minimum infrastructure required by people to exist digitally, right? So, people sell, people study, report emergencies, or apply for government subsidies or social services. This happens because the state has failed to build a robust public alternative, and tech companies have filled that institutional vacuum. From below, big tech appears as free, especially because in my country, in Colombia, zero rating plans that have made certain that some platforms are exempt from data charges, so people use them and they have become the norm. But this sense of free is deceptive because people pay with their data with different type of vulnerabilities like account bans or the impossibility to seek redress when there something goes wrong. In informal contexts, these costs are really hidden and they magnify the dependence on big platforms. Big tech functions as a form of private governance. Big tech defines rules, they define sanctions, they define visibility criteria, and I want to speak more on that later. And even they define what is acceptable as public speech. And these decisions are made really far away from users with little to no understanding of the local context or community dynamics. From below, communities do not participate in shaping any technological decisions. They are simply users generating data. And big tech treats peripheral regions as Latin America, for example, as emerging markets, not as communities with rights and specific needs that require minimum or meaningful safeguards. When an account is blocked or content is removed, people have no idea whom to contact. There are no physical offices, no responsible staff, no understandable appeal mechanisms. And in these communities, big tech is omnipresent, but you cannot reach them. The sad thing about this is that people learn to navigate with intermittent connectivity, with limited data, and with this big tech dominating the space, dominating the digital lives that we're living right now. In this environment, platforms that require fewer resources and have become dominant, in fact, actually represent this public space. For us, it is not a technological achievement that big tech dominates the space, that big tech are the relationship that citizens have in the peripheric regions. This is a reflection of structural inequalities that constrain the autonomy of people. So that's what I would say from below.
Yeah, I was just asking you to sort of bring out more, I think, more contextual case studies from maybe the ones that you're studying as a part of Digitalis. Yeah.
Of course, and thank you for inviting us to be here today. As Kata said, I guess now people are becoming increasingly aware of big data's power and platform power, so they feel like maybe that these are necessary evil since they don't, since while they concentrate services that are useful, they cannot escape it in a sense. That is why, for instance, if we look into the media landscape, the traditional media landscape in Latin America, for instance, we will see that is such hugely concentrated in the hands of few powerful groups that these social media platforms emerged as an alternative for exercising the right to communicate for several of them, starting their small businesses, sharing relevant information from their context, sharing information from their communities, organizing in various ways to preserve their knowledge, to share their culture. So people really engaged and used these platforms as an alternative to traditional media that was not accessible to them for such a long time. And let's recall that in the beginning, social media, for instance, was not only big tech. Let's think of YouTube, Instagram, and WhatsApp, for instance, which were acquired by Google and Meta only after they were somehow popular by users. In fact, part of the power of big tech is precisely derived from their capacity to acquire other business and expand to other areas. Once these platforms capture people's networks and attention and eliminate any relevant alternative, they can manipulate their platforms and change their characteristics according to their own corporate interests. And that's kind of what happened to social media we can think of. We can recall, for instance, that in the beginning, they centralized in a feed content that was published by our colleagues, to now showcase content from producers that we have no idea who they are or why they are being shown to us. I invite you to do an easy test. I tried to do it recently in my social media, is to revise our feeds and see how much of non-requested information is provided to us before we reach the content produced by our own contacts, by our friends. It's almost like old school television, but worse, because we are not only watching, we are feeding their business with our data, our subjectivity, our personality, as we watch. And it's also worse, I believe, because we're not seeing the same. We are being fragmented and divided, even in our culture consumption practices, according to some interests that are being assumed by our online behavior in these echo chambers that were named by some scholars. And I invite us also to differentiate between the assumption of our interests based on the data that these companies collect from us, from our actual selves, right? So we are being fragmented, divided into certain groups, and we are not finding the space for building our common practices online, building our common cultures online. So we live in a contradiction now. We are increasingly exposed to information on the harms of such platforms and companies, and that's even in contexts like the Latin American context, in which, for instance, social media platforms are being proposed to be banned for people, for young people and adolescents, that are increasing conversations about the harms that these modes of interactions can generate to younger groups, for instance, but we are seeing them increase their power in entering new sectors like education, health, etc., as Kata also mentioned. So I believe that the feeling from below, looking into this big tech giant, is that we are trapped. The platforms are less useful, but our content and networks are captured there. There became the space for accessing public interest information published by authorities, news media, etc. We lived that during the pandemic, where information even about vaccination was available only online, and we needed to accept their terms of service to access information that were so crucial for our well-being at that moment. And that's because these companies were successful, making the different actors believe that the only space to be online was this private corporate space, and even making us believe that there was no corporate interest behind them. And that's why it's so interesting moment where we are right now, because they are already exposed in that sense, at least.
Thank you, Jamila. I think what I wanted to also, I mean, just to break it down for the audience also, because we keep encountering law in our everyday lives as well. Like, for example, terms and conditions that are there when we click the cookies that come in, or even like, for example, what we accept and what we deny. So everything that law becomes an all-pervasive thing in the everyday encounters of big tech in our lives these days. So I would want you to share maybe like how do you encounter that in the sense like what is it the last terms and conditions that you probably agreed with, or what is it like how you felt in terms of your rights or privacy getting violated as a part of it. If you could share that, maybe the audience can also relate to it in terms of how law and accountability really becomes a part of our everyday lives. Yeah.
Well, recently, I was informed about some terms and conditions that I agreed without having a specific notice or without having a specific agreement, which was Strava platform. This is like this exercise app, running app, and apparently they just changed their terms of service. I haven't read them. I am subscriber to their service for a long time, but I didn't enter the platform. I guess it's a good thing that they send me an email with notification, but it's a terrible thing that I have naturalized so much not reading these contracts that I didn't read them, and I just know that they are doing a lot of things I might not be I might not be agreeing with, but I can't challenge.
Yeah. Kata, do you want to come in here or share something that your last encounters with big tech?
I don't remember. I believe it must be in an email, just like Jamila said before. But I'm also thinking about like the everyday political decisions that we make inside Charisma, if it helps at all.
Right.
So, I mean, I do not remember, but I have in mind that every day when we are, I mean, Charisma is a civil society organization in Colombia, and so far we haven't paid for ads in any, I mean, in the 20 years of existence, we haven't paid for ads in social media. And every day we have this conversation because we are right now not that visible, right? So, I mean, the terms of and conditions, or also the way that the platforms work, is an everyday topic because we haven't paid for ads, but we know that the information that we produce is not that visible to people. So we are all the time like debating. I mean, we have made the choice that we are not going to pay for ads because, I mean, this would mean using the data that some users are giving to the platforms that they are not aware of. But we do know that we are losing visibility. So this is an everyday conversation because our work that we take so much work. I mean, it takes so much work to make all these research or advocacy strategies. It takes so much work, and right now people are getting their information in social media. I mean, most of the information, because we are now seeing new studies that talk about in Latin America, for example, the impact of TV and radio still, but we are, I mean, the most information we consume is in our devices. So right now, every day it comes up like we are not paying for ads, but we do know that there are some rules around the platforms that we have to navigate, and that it is becoming really unfair. So, for example, we are all the time trying to trick the algorithm in a way so we do not upload information with logos because the algorithm uh, diminishes their visibility, for example. And this is something that we do not, I mean, right now we have decided that our social media presence is not that big, and we have just made pieces with that. But we do know that other organizations struggle a lot, invest a lot of resources on making their social media presence. And this also happens to small media, just like Jamila said before. So right now there are a lot of conditions that it is not only the terms and conditions that we sign without knowledge, but also all these little rules that change so quickly, and that we have to accommodate and be flexible and try to dominate, because we know that if you're not visible in social media, you are not visible at all to a lot of the people that are looking for your work. So I would say it's not only the terms and conditions that you're accepting, but the way that the platform works, that it is not even that clear, because at least the terms and conditions that you do not read, they are written down, but the way the algorithm works, it's not written down. So I would just add this complexity perhaps to what we're speaking about.
Right. I think, thank you. And I think the paradox of this is basically this tension and the impacts that are constantly getting more and more part of our everyday lives in that sense. So maybe I think if we come to the next part of it, I would ask both of you to think about how do we then sort of reimagine or rethink big tech, or the big tech as we call it, in coming from a global south perspective, how do you reimagine it? And how do we actually empower that below, or the everydayness of it from below, so that we are also able to sort of encounter this and hold them accountable in a more, on an ethical sense, in that sense.
Maybe I can start, Arena, just to reinforce the point brought by Kata also on the levels of power and control that these platforms have and how we can shift and change that. I guess the algorithm power is more than ever present, and we should also think of I often hear a conversation about we should read the terms of service, but what we will find when we read the terms of service, or what is our power, how can we challenge those terms of service? And that's the problem that we are having right now, that we are naturalizing not reading these contracts, maybe not even understanding that they are contracts. We're just feeling that this is necessary evil. This is something that we need to accept in order to participate in online digital public sphere, for instance. And the problem is that if the digital public sphere is concentrated into certain companies, then we have a problem, because these are few companies that are deciding how we engage online, how do we exercise our rights to communicate, to express ourselves, to organize online, and how do we even how are we even able to exercise our privacy? And there is an additional problem, which is maybe going back to your last question, coming for the global south, we could think of, let's make these platforms more accountable by demanding them to change their terms of service, to be more precise or to be more explicit in the legal terms that they use. One of the things I've done before joining Derechos Digitales was to precisely analyze terms of use and their impacts to human rights. Actually, there is a study that is published, it's called Human Rights, Terms of Service and Human Rights. I can share the link afterwards if you're interested. And when we read those terms of service, we understand that they are actually difficult to understand. It's actually difficult to even identify which are the documents that are binding within those terms of service, because they make reference to a huge amount of other documents, video, explanatory things. And when you reach them, you're like, is this what it is? When they say they change the terms of service, are they also changing those Q&As, explanatory videos, etc.? Or what are the rules I'm engaging with? And these are the visible rules, and then you have the algorithm side, which is the not so visible rules. And to give an example from the recent study that we did together with the Arise Network, that I believe you already mentioned in the beginning of your intervention, Raina, is that even words are being censored within the platform. So if I want to report for police abuse, something that is very common in Latin America, I cannot use certain words that my content might be taken down. So the platform owns the legal layer and the implementation layer, and users have to adapt to be able to express and reach the audience they need, and that has a lot of consequences for human rights. To finalize, going back to what I believe would be a platform, a principle for the Global South in platform design, I would choose do no harm, which is avoid to cause harm even unintentionally. And for me, that implies understanding context and deeply understanding context, which also implies having meaningful participation from communities in the design process of these platforms. And what you're seeing is precisely the opposite. It's a closing of spaces for participation. All the Derechos Digitales is also reaching its 20 years old this year, and all the small advances we have seen in these ecosystems depart from actual community participation and community pressure, demanding platforms to respond differently to their own needs and context. So I would choose that as a principle for new platforms. And of course, if I have to say something also, I guess it would be interoperability. So we are not trapped into certain platforms, and we are able to take our information wherever we want to take.
Kata, do you want to add anything to it?
I would only add perhaps just these. I don't know if I'm comfortable with the term that people have designed for this, but empowerment by design also. So that people, I mean, what we've seen, like I said before, we have seen a loss of autonomy when we are navigating social media, because just like Jamila said in the first part of this space, was that platforms decide what we see. So perhaps I would also echo, I mean, the context, the part of the meaningful participation and also the interoperability. I would add like this empowerment by this, that the user gets to choose whatever they see, and they get the chance to make an informed decision about what they're seeing. So that would be all that I would add, because I believe I completely agree with what Jamila said, and proposes as a different type of platforms. And yeah, I would say that. And yeah, for me, that would be it.
Right. I think let's wrap it up because it was almost to the end of the session, and we also stick to the time a bit. So yeah, I mean, I was just wrapping it up, saying that we are almost at the end of the session, and we just wanted to sort of like really highlight the fact that the merit in rooting it in the politics of the global south, so to say, because I think what Arise is also trying to do is trying to sort of bring together and as collectives, and to hold big techs accountable for whatever they're doing in global south, the differential policies that they're pushing, and the kind of awareness that needs to be really built amongst the public, so that people are I mean, the fact that there's a actually lack of digital literacy amongst the common public to really understand how law or how big techs are really controlling our lives. That's something that we need to start with, I think, and that's something that echoed in both the interventions that you gave. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining with us. I just wanted to let you know that we've launched the anthology, and Jamila had also contributed to that chapter. I will share it with you soon. So thank you so much for all the support and all the contributions. And I know it's really, really early in the morning for you guys. I don't want to hold you for long. Thank you so much.